it's not in the synagogue. It takes place in the home. So even secular Jews keep the Passover. It's kind of like a family reunion. It's just a great time. It's a freedom celebration. It's called a Seder. Seder is a Hebrew word which means order or arrangement, because there's a very strict order to this meal. And on the day before Passover, there's a ritual called the search for chametz. Don't say it because it's real speedy. Okay? The search for chametz. Chametz is a Hebrew word that means leaven or yeast. And the day before Passover, Jews all over the world search and destroy every trace of leaven in their homes. Why? Because 8 times in 5 verses in Exodus chapter 12, God says, no leaven for Passover. Keep it out of your house, keep it out of your body. It is taboo for Passover. And so they go through all the cupboards, and Betty Crocker is evicted, and the Pillsbury Doughboy is destroyed, and anything that has any kind of trace of leaven or yeast is gotten rid of. In the old days, they used to get all the leaven products out in the Jewish neighborhoods. They'd make this huge pile out in the streets of the leaven products, and they would set fire to it. They'd have a bonfire on the day before Passover. But the rabbis have a way around it now, because they say that, you know, donuts are really expensive, so so don't burn it. This is true. I'm not supposed to tell you this because this is inside Jewish information, but I'm going to break the rules. The rabbis say, no, don't burn it. Just get all your leaven products together and sell it to your Gentile neighbor for $1. This can be very lucrative for you because you can sell it back for 10. You know. Some Jewish homes are so careful to observe the commandment to get the leaven out that they actually rip the wallpaper off the walls and scrape the glue off the walls. Because in the glue is a leavening agent. God said, no leaven for Passover. Now why? I mean, this seems a little meshugana, a little crazy, doesn't it? Yeah, a little meshugana. Why go to all this trouble to get rid of leaven? What is leaven a symbol of? Sin. Did you know that in the Bible, leaven or yeast is a symbol of sin or evil or corruption? And it's a really good symbol too, because leaven is like sin. It just takes a little bit to corrupt its host. It's also very tasty. That's exactly right. I know this very well, by the way, because I used to be a baker. I worked my way through Bible school in Alaska by making donuts all night. You know, Gentile bagels. My last Gentile joke didn't go over very well. No, I would make donuts at night, and I go to Bible school in the daytime. And I will never forget my first night, because you start at 2 a.m. when you're making donuts. And I thought there would be people there, and you know, everybody would be helping me, and I'd have all the dough mixed up, and no one was there. I was all alone, and all I had was a recipe, and it told me what to do. So I had to mix up my own dough. And it wasn't like they had little 1-pound sacks of flour. These were 100-pound sacks. I had to schlep these things over these enormous vats and dump it in the vat. Germans like that. You know, I think you would. Yiddish. Yiddish and German. Yiddish is mostly German.
Yeah, the Rosensteins
and you're a real mensch.
And sugar.
When it came to the water, it wasn't like tablespoons of water, it was gallons of water, hundreds of pounds of flour. But I read the recipe, and the recipe, when it came to the yeast, the leaven, it was like this much. I was sure they were wrong, so I added quite a bit more. And I mixed up this huge amount of sticky, yucky dough, and as I was instructed, I made these little cabbage-sized bits of dough, and I put them down on the big, huge bench. I had about a dozen of these things, and took the first one out and started rolling it out. I'm a baker. I'd never even made Pop-Tarts before this. And so here I am, I'm all alone in the back of this bakery in Homer, Alaska, and kind of getting into it. You know, if you've never rolled out dough, it's extremely therapeutic. It's really fun. And I was looking around the bakery and all the high tech back here, and frankly I was taking too much time, and it was a warm night. And suddenly I heard something. Now, I don't know if you know this, but you're not supposed to hear dough. And I looked over to what a moment ago were these nice little secure, stable heads of dough that had now become a threat to our national security. They were bloated up like this, going off the table and out the door. That little bit of leaven was doing its thing. It was consuming the best part of the dough, the sugar, and in so doing, it was producing a gas until it was like a monster inside that dough. And that's exactly what sin does. The Apostle Paul, speaking to a leavened congregation, the Corinthians, remember? 1 Corinthians 5, he says, hey guys, your glorying isn't good. Then he says, he reminds them, in the language of the Passover, he says, don't you know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Therefore, Paul says, keep the feast, now you know what he's talking about, not with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread, the matzah of sincerity and truth. Brothers and sisters, let's not complicate it, it's very simple. The Jews don't come to the Passover table until they've first done some work, some house cleaning. They search and destroy any trace of leaven, and then they're fit for the Passover. You see a parallel? We're not to come to the communion table for the Lord's Supper until we've done a little bit of house cleaning. In 1 Corinthians 11, Paul says that some of us, believers, have actually died by reason of mishandling the Lord's Supper, by reason of bringing our leaven to the table. This is serious stuff. And so the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11, do some house cleaning, self-examine before you come to the table. It is life and death business, because this is a sacred table. And this body and this blood that we're handling, we don't do this glibly. Do a little house cleaning. Now the cool thing, it's extremely easy to clean house as a Christian. 1 John chapter 1, verses 8 through 10, talk about how to clean house. If we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to do what? Forgive us and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. It's not that difficult. Confession and repentance is all the mop and bucket you need to clean out all the leaven. You will be forgiven. Again and again and again. You'll be cleansed again and again and again. But make sure you do the self-examination, and then you're fit for the table. All right, so finally everybody's at the table. It's Passover night, Nisan 14. It's always in the springtime in the northern hemisphere, in the autumn here in the south. And as with many Jewish holidays, this one begins with the lighting of candles. Now, have you guys ever been to a Jewish home for Erev Shabbat, for Friday night Sabbath? Okay. You'll notice there's lighting of candles. For Hanukkah, there's lighting of candles. A lot of candle lighting in Judaism. But if this were a true Passover, I would have just performed a blasphemous act, because men are not allowed to light the candles. I don't think it's because men can't be trusted with matches, which is actually true. But it's actually because of a legend. It's sort of a secular proverb that goes like this. That just as through a woman, darkness entered the world, don't get mad at me ladies, that just means that Eve was tempted first in the garden, right? You have to deal with that, sorry. Just as through a woman darkness entered the world, so through a woman would light enter. Is that true? Yeah. First messianic prophecy in the entire Bible. First one I can find anyway. Genesis 3, verse 15. Remember the context? You got the Addams family, remember? And as a result of a very, very bad choice, sin has entered into the human fabric. And sin is doing its leavening work. Remember, sin is like leaven in that it infects its host. How do they make sourdough bread? Yeah, generations of yeast. In other words, that first loaf is infected, and then before it's put into the oven to bake, a little bit is taken out of that infected dough and impregnated into another unleavened dough. And then you have a new generation of leavened dough, and then before you bake it. So you have multiple generations. There are families actually who have leaven hundreds of years old from generations past that they've brought on from generation to generation. That's exactly what we're talking about. Exactly what we're talking about. The human fabric is now spoiled. And right in the context of this horror, Genesis chapter 3, when this whole leavening thing began, it's like the camera pans, it's a very dramatic moment, the camera pans to the serpent, who we find out at the end of the book in Revelation is who? Yeah, Hasatan in Hebrew, the Satan, okay? The serpent who is Satan, God speaks to him, the one who tempted Adam and Eve. And God says to him these bizarre words. And I love the Hebrew because it's very explicit. It says, snake, your head is going to be bashed in by the seed of a woman. Now wait a minute, that's really weird in the Hebrew idiomatic language. I mean, if you read Jewish genealogies, it's always men's names, right? Seed of a woman. And Biology 101 will tell you that the seed is carried by a man, not a woman. Lord, what are you talking about? The seed of a woman would crush Satan and end the leaven cycle. Guys, don't you see? In the context of what has just happened, it would have to be the seed of a woman, because the seed of man could never produce an unleavened product. Anybody born into the world the normal way, by the passage of the seed from a man to a woman, could not produce a being who's unleavened. It would have to be someone born outside the cycle of sin, outside the sourdough cycle. It would have to be the seed of a woman, speaking in cryptic terms of the fact that one would have to be born of a woman, the Messiah, Jesus. And so indeed, it's true. The light has come into the world through a woman. And so it's appropriate that a woman light the candles. At every place setting, there's a little book called Haggadah. It's read the correct way, from right to left, because that's how you read Hebrew, long before English was written, or German. It takes from 5 to 7 hours to get through this, so I hope you're comfortable. We will abbreviate it quite a bit. By the way, Haggadah is a Hebrew word. It comes from Exodus chapter 12, where God says to the Jewish parents, the Haggadah, and you shall tell your children of this great redemption from Egypt. And so this is the telling of the story. And we're actually eating our way through, it's very Jewish, we're eating our way through the story. And all the festivals you just sort of move into as a way of remembering what God did. It's very, Jewish festivals are great in that way. Now you'll notice there are 4 cups. Now these 4 cups represent 4 promises that God made to the Jewish people in Exodus chapter 6. I'm reading Exodus 6 and verses 6 and 7. There are 4 cups of wine that are drunk, actually 4 sips. If we drank 4 cups, we'd never get to the end of the service. 4 sips representing these 4 I wills from Exodus chapter 6 and verses 6 and 7. Listen to this. Say to the children of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. The first cup is called the cup of sanctification. It represents the first I will bring you out. What does it mean to be sanctified?
Set apart. Set apart?
Set apart, to be brought out from the world system for God's purposes. So this is called the cup of sanctification in the Passover liturgy. Here's the second I will. I will rescue you from their bondage. Second I will, second cup is called the cup of judgment. Because how did he rescue Israel from bondage? But by judging Egypt for sin. So this is the cup of judgment. The third I will, and this is the one which the rabbis say is the most important of the whole service. It's called the cup of redemption. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. The cup of redemption. It's kind of the fulcrum on which rests the entire service. In fact, they represented the blood of the lambs. And what they would do is they'd actually heat the third cup to the temperature of blood to make it a more vivid symbol. This represented the blood of the lambs. They wouldn't drink blood, they would just make a symbol of the blood. Interesting to see how Jesus used this cup in his last Passover. And the fourth I will, verse 7, I will take you as my people and I will be your God. The last cup is called the cup of the kingdom. God says, I'm going to be your king and you're going to Now,